Some secrets eat at a man's soul until there's nothing left but shadow and regret. Cole Maddox had carried his burden for 15 long years, watching it consume him one silent day at a time. In the frontier town of Copper Ridge, folks knew better than to ask about the bandage on his left arm. The quiet cowboy kept to himself, working odd jobs and never staying long enough to call anywhere home. They figured it was an old injury from his wild youth, maybe a knife wound or a branding iron. Accident. They were wrong. What lay beneath that cloth wasn't healing. It was growing, spreading through his flesh like poison ivy through a garden. Cole had learned to live with the pain and the strange dreams that came with it. But now something was changing, and he was running out of time. What happens when you discover you've been carrying something that doesn't belong in this world? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Asterisk. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Henderson ranch as Cole Maddox guided his horse through the familiar gates. The leather journal in his saddlebag bounced gently with each step, its warm pages filled with sketches and half-remembered fragments from a night he'd spent 15 years trying to forget. The book was his constant companion. Though he rarely opened it anymore, the memories it contained were too painful, too confusing to make sense of. Cole had been working the Henderson spread for 3 months now, longer than he'd stayed anywhere in recent years. There was something about this place that felt different, something that made him want to put down roots, even though every instinct told him to keep moving. Maybe it was the way the morning light painted the mountains purple and gold, or the sound of cattle lowing in the distance. Or maybe it was Sarah Henderson herself, with her kind eyes and gentle way of never pushing him to talk about things he wasn't ready to share. "Morning, Cole," came her voice from the porch of the main house. Sarah stepped down the wooden steps, wiping her hands on her apron. At 28, she had the quiet strength that came from growing up on a working ranch, her auburn hair catching the early light as she moved. Pa's already out checking the north pasture. He said you might want to start with the fence repairs near Miller's Creek. Cole touched the brim of his hat, a gesture so automatic it felt like breathing. "Morning, Miss Sarah. I'll head out that way directly." He paused, studying her face. There was something different about her expression today, a kind of searching look that made him shift uncomfortably in his saddle. "Cole," she said, her voice softer now, "you've been favoring that left arm again. If you're hurt, we should have. Doc Whitman, take a look." The words hit him like a physical blow, though he kept his expression neutral. His left arm, always his left arm. No matter how carefully he moved, how deliberately he positioned himself, people noticed. Not the wound itself, hidden as it was beneath layers of cloth and careful sleeve positioning, but the way he protected it, the slight stiffness in his movements when the pain flared. "Just an old injury," he said, the same words he'd been saying for 15 years. "Nothing Doc Whitman can fix." Sarah's eyes lingered on his face, and for a moment he thought she might press the issue. Instead, she nodded and stepped back. "Well, you know where to find me if you need anything." As Cole rode toward Miller's Creek, he reflected on how different his life had become since arriving in Copper Ridge. Before this, he'd been a drifter in the truest sense, moving from town to town, ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to form real connections. It was safer that way, easier to hide the truth about what he carried beneath his sleeve. The wound had appeared the night after his 19th birthday, after that terrible night at the abandoned Perdition Silver Mine. He'd been young and reckless. Then, drawn by stories of easy money and forgotten treasures. What he'd found instead was something that defied explanation, something that had marked him in ways that went far deeper than flesh and bone. At first, he'd thought it would heal like any other wound. He treated it with whiskey and hope, wrapping it tight and waiting for time to work its magic. But days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and the wound remained. Not just remained, it grew. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but undeniably spreading beneath his skin like roots seeking water. The pain came in waves, sometimes dull and manageable, other times sharp enough to steal his breath. But worse than the physical discomfort were the dreams. Strange, vivid nightmares where he saw through eyes that weren't his own, felt hunger that belonged to something vast and alien. In these dreams, he was both predator and prey, hunter and hunted, connected to something that watched him from the darkness with ancient, patient eyes. Miller's Creek bubbled cheerfully as Cole dismounted near the damaged fence line. The work was honest and straightforward, replacing rotted posts, restringing wire, making things whole again. It was the kind of labor that quieted his mind, giving him something to focus on besides the constant ache in his arm and the whispers that seemed to follow him wherever he went. As he worked, Cole found himself thinking about the journal in his saddlebag. He'd started writing it shortly after the incident at the mine, trying to make sense of what had happened to him. The early entries were frantic, desperate attempts to capture every detail of that night. Later entries became more philosophical, questioning what it meant to carry a secret that was slowly eating him alive. The sketches were harder to explain. Sometimes he'd wait to find his hand had moved across the page while he slept, drawing symbols and shapes that meant nothing to his waking mind, but felt significant in ways he couldn't articulate. Geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly, landscapes of impossible terrain, and always lurking at the edges of these unconscious drawings, the suggestion of something watching, waiting. Afternoon, stranger. The voice made Cole look up from his work. An elderly man sat on a paint horse about 30 yards away, watching him with bright, curious eyes. Cole recognized him as Doc Whitman, the town's physician. The old man had a reputation for being both skilled and discreet, qualities that made him popular among folks who valued their privacy. "Afternoon, Doc," Cole replied, setting down his wire cutters. "Beautiful day for a ride." Doc Whitman guided his horse closer, his practiced eye taking in Cole's work. "Doing a fine job there. Thomas Henderson's lucky to have found someone willing to work so hard." He paused, his gaze settling on Cole's carefully positioned left arm. "You know, I've been practicing medicine in these parts for 37 years, seeing all manner of injuries and ailments. If something's troubling you, son, I'd be happy to take a look." The offer was genuine, spoken without judgment or excessive curiosity. For a moment, Cole felt the overwhelming urge to accept, to finally share his burden with someone who might understand. The weight of carrying his secret alone had grown heavier with each passing year, and there were times when he wondered if the isolation might kill him before whatever was growing in his arm finally claimed him. But then he remembered the last time he trusted someone with the truth, a doctor in Denver who'd taken one look at the wound and declared him either mad or cursed. The man had tried to have him committed to an asylum, convinced that Cole's condition was either elaborate self-harm or evidence of mental instability. It had taken all of Cole's cunning and his fast draw to escape that situation, and he'd sworn never to put himself in such a vulnerable position again. "I appreciate the offer, Doc," Cole said carefully, "but I'm managing just fine." Doc Whitman studied him for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. "Sometimes the things we think we're managing are actually managing us," he said quietly. "But I respect the man's right to his privacy. Just know that if you ever change your mind, my door's always open." As the old doctor rode away, Cole returned to his work with less enthusiasm than before. The conversation had stirred up feelings he'd worked hard to suppress, reminders of the loneliness that was his constant companion. He thought about Sarah's concerned expression that morning, about the way she looked at him like she could see past his carefully constructed defenses. That evening, Cole returned to his small cabin on the edge of the Henderson property. It wasn't much, just a single room with a bed, a table, and a wood stove, but it was the closest thing to home he'd known in years. The walls were bare, except for a small mirror and a photograph of his parents, both long dead. His few possessions were arranged with military precision, clothes folded and stored, weapons cleaned and ready, the leather journal tucked safely. Beneath his mattress, the nightly ritual of tending to his wound was both familiar and dreaded. Cole carefully unwrapped the layers of cloth that concealed the mark, revealing skin that no longer looked entirely human. The wound itself defied easy description, not quite a scar, not quite an open sore, but something in between. The flesh around it had taken on an odd, translucent quality, shot through with dark veins that pulsed with their own rhythm. Tonight, the pulsing seemed stronger than usual, and Cole felt the familiar chill of fear creep up his spine. The wound was changing again, growing in ways that terrified him. He could see new patterns forming beneath his skin, geometric shapes that echoed the drawings in his journal. Whatever had infected him that night at the mine wasn't content to simply mark him. It was transforming him, slowly but inexorably, into something else as he rewrapped the wound with fresh cloth. Cole found himself thinking about Sarah Henderson. Again, there was something about her that made him want to be better than he was, to find a way to overcome the darkness that had claimed him. But how could he ask someone to love a man who wasn't entirely human anymore? How could he build a future when he didn't even know what he was becoming? Outside his cabin window, the desert night was alive with the sounds of insects and distant coyotes. But underneath those familiar sounds, Cole thought he could hear something else, a low, rhythmic thrumming that seemed to come from deep beneath the earth. It was a sound that called to the thing in his arm, making it pulse in response, like a heart keeping time with some vast, hidden drummer. Cole closed his eyes and tried to push the sound from his mind, but it lingered at the edge of his consciousness, like a half-remembered song. Whatever had marked him 15 years ago wasn't finished with him yet. He could feel it stirring, growing stronger, preparing for something that filled him with both dread and strange, unwelcome anticipation. Tomorrow would bring another day of honest work, another opportunity to pretend he was just like everyone else. But tonight, alone in his cabin with the desert whispering its ancient secrets, Cole Maddox wondered how much longer he could keep running from the truth of what he'd become. The leather journal called to him from beneath his mattress, its pages full of clues he'd never been able to piece together. Perhaps it was time to stop running and start looking for answers. Perhaps it was time to return to Perdition Mine and face whatever was waiting for him in the darkness. The Copper Ridge Saloon had seen better days, but it remained the heart of the small town's social life. On this particular Friday evening, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sound of men trying to forget their troubles at the bottom of a whiskey glass. Cole sat at his usual table in the back corner, nursing a beer and watching the room with the careful attention of a man who'd learned not to trust crowds. That's when Dr. Marcus Blackwood walked in. The stranger was immediately noticeable, not just for his expensive Eastern clothes or the ornate black medical bag he carried, but for the way he moved with the confident bearing of a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. He was perhaps 50 years old, with silver hair slicked back and sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Evening, gentlemen," Dr. Blackwood announced to the room at large, his voice carrying the cultured accent of Boston or New York. "I'm Dr. Marcus Blackwood, recently arrived from Chicago. I'll be staying in your fine town for a few weeks, offering my medical services to anyone in need of modern treatment." Cole felt a familiar prickle of unease. Traveling doctors were nothing new on the frontier, but something about this one set his teeth on edge. The man's gaze swept the room like a hawk studying prey, and when those pale blue eyes landed on Cole, they lingered just a moment too long. "Chicago, you say?" This came from Jake Morrison, a local rancher known for his loud opinions and short, Temper. Well, Doc, maybe you can tell us city folk something. We got ourselves a mystery man here. He gestured toward Cole with his whiskey glass. Been hiding something under that sleeve of his for as long as he's been in town. What do you make of a man who won't roll up his sleeves even in this heat? The saloon grew quiet. Cole felt every eye in the room turned toward him, and his right hand instinctively moved closer to his gun. He'd hoped to avoid this kind of attention, but Jake Morrison had been drinking, and drunk men were unpredictable creatures. I make of him a man with a right to his privacy, Dr. Blackwood said smoothly, though his eyes remained fixed on Cole with uncomfortable intensity. Medical conditions can be deeply personal matters. Medical condition? Jake laughed harshly. Or maybe he's hiding the mark of a coward. Maybe he got branded for deserting from the army or running from a fight. Cole stood slowly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but everyone in the room could see the danger in it. I think you've had enough to drink, Jake, he said quietly. Have I now? Jake swayed to his feet, his hand dropping to the gun on his hip. Maybe it's time someone found out what you're really hiding, stranger. Maybe it's time. The fight erupted with the sudden violence of a summer thunderstorm. Jake went for his gun, but Cole was faster, much faster than any normal man should have been. His draw was smooth as silk, the Colt appearing in his hand as if by magic. But Jake's friend Tom Barrett chose that moment to smash a chair across Cole's back, sending him stumbling forward. What followed was chaos. Fists flew, tables overturned, and glass shattered as half the saloon joined in the brawl with the enthusiasm of men starved for excitement. Cole found himself fighting on instinct, his enhanced reflexes and strength giving him advantages he tried desperately to hide. But there were too many of them, and the blow to his back had reopened old wounds. A whiskey bottle caught him across the temple, and the world exploded in stars and darkness. As Cole fell, he felt something warm and wet spreading down his left arm. In his dazed state, he couldn't tell if it was blood from a new wound or something worse, something seeping from the thing that lived beneath his skin. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness claimed him was Dr. Blackwood's voice, calm and authoritative. Someone help me get this man to my room. I'm a doctor, and he needs immediate medical attention. Cole awoke to the sensation of skilled hands examining his body. He was lying on a bed in what appeared to be a hotel room, his shirt removed, his left arm fully exposed to the lamplight. Dr. Blackwood sat beside him, and the expression on the man's face was one of absolute fascination mixed with something that might have been fear. Extraordinary, the doctor murmured, not realizing Cole had regained consciousness. Absolutely extraordinary. The cellular structure appears to be— Don't touch it, Cole said sharply, trying to sit up. The movement sent waves of pain through his head, but he forced himself to focus. His worst nightmare had come true. Someone had seen the wound, examined it, and now knew he was something other than human. Dr. Blackwood looked up, his blue eyes bright with scientific curiosity. Mr. Maddox, isn't it? Please, don't try to move just yet. You have a concussion, and there are some other injuries that need attention. But first, I need to ask you about this. He gestured to Cole's exposed arm. The wound was fully visible, now no longer hidden by layers of carefully positioned cloth. In the lamplight, it looked worse than Cole had ever seen it, a sprawling network of dark veins and translucent flesh that pulsed with its own alien rhythm. The geometric patterns he'd been drawing in his journal were clearly visible beneath his skin, as if something had been writing itself into his very flesh. How long have you had this condition? Dr. Blackwood asked, his voice gentle but insistent. This is unlike anything I've encountered in 25 years of medical practice. Cole tried to swing his legs over the side of the bed, but the doctor's hand pressed firmly against his shoulder. Despite his appearance, Dr. Blackwood was stronger than he looked. And Cole was still weak from the fight and whatever the wound was doing to him. "I need to leave," Cole said desperately. "You can't tell anyone about this. You can't, Mr. Maddox, please. I'm a man of science, not superstition. Whatever is happening to you, I may be able to help. But I need your cooperation, and I need the truth. How did you acquire this ... infection?" The word hit Cole like a physical blow. Infection. That's what it was, wasn't it? Something foreign had gotten into his system that night at Perdition Mine. Something that had been changing him from the inside out for 15 years. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," Cole said quietly. "Try me. I've seen things in my travels that would challenge any rational man's understanding of the world. I keep an open mind when it comes to medical anomalies." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Cole saw genuine scientific curiosity in the doctor's eyes, but also something else, a hunger that made him deeply uncomfortable. This man wanted to study him, to understand what he was becoming, and Cole wasn't sure if those intentions were entirely benevolent. 15 years ago, Cole began slowly, I went to an abandoned silver mine called Perdition, about 50 miles north of here. There were stories about treasure hidden in the deepest tunnels, and I was young and foolish enough to believe them. What I found instead was, he paused, struggling to find words for something that defied description, something that shouldn't exist, something that marked me. Dr. Blackwood leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. "Marked you how?" "I don't remember all of it clearly. There was light and sound, and something that felt like being touched by liquid fire. When I woke up, I was lying outside the mine entrance with this wound already forming on my arm. It's been growing ever since." "Growing?" The doctor's voice was sharp with professional interest. "In what way?" Cole reluctantly extended his arm, allowing Dr. Blackwood to examine the wound more closely. Under the magnifying glass the doctor produced from his bag, the alien patterns were even more visible, geometric designs that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. "The patterns are expanding," Cole explained, slowly but steadily. And lately, he hesitated, then decided he was already too far committed to the truth to stop now. "Lately, I've been having dreams, visions. Sometimes I can see things that haven't happened yet, or sense things I shouldn't be able to sense." Dr. Blackwood set down his magnifying glass and reached for a leather-bound journal from his medical bag. "Mr. Maddox, I believe we need to work together to understand what's happening to you. This may be the most significant medical discovery of our time. Will you trust me to help you find answers?" Cole looked at the doctor's eager face and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. He'd spent 15 years hiding from the truth about what he was becoming. Now, faced with someone who claimed he could help, Cole had to decide whether to trust a stranger with secrets that could destroy him, or continue carrying his burden alone. Outside the hotel window, thunder rumbled across the desert sky, and Cole could swear he heard something else in that sound, a low, resonant call that made the thing in his arm pulse in response. Whatever was waiting for him at Perdition Mine, it was growing impatient. And now he had to decide if Dr. Marcus Blackwood was the ally he desperately needed, or another predator drawn to his scent. Dr. Blackwood spent the next 3 hours conducting the most thorough medical examination Cole had ever experienced. The doctor's instruments were unlike anything he'd seen, precision tools that belonged more in a laboratory than a frontier medical bag. Each measurement, each observation, was carefully recorded in the doctor's journal with the methodical precision of a man accustomed to documenting the impossible. "The tissue shows signs of rapid cellular regeneration," Dr. Blackwood murmured as he worked, more to himself than to Cole. "But the regenerative pattern is unlike anything in known medical literature. It's as if something is rewriting your biological structure at the molecular level." Cole watched the doctor work with growing unease. There was something unsettling about the man's intensity, the way his eyes lit up with each new discovery. "What does that mean?" Cole asked. "It means, Mr. Maddox, that whatever infected you is far more sophisticated than any earthly pathogen. This is organized, purposeful, as if something is deliberately modifying your physiology for a specific purpose." The words sent a chill down Cole's spine. He'd always known the wound was unnatural, but to hear it described as purposeful, as part of some larger plan, made him feel like a puppet dancing to invisible strings as dawn broke over Copper Ridge. Dr. Blackwood finally allowed Cole to dress and prepare to leave. "I'll need to see you again soon," the doctor said, closing his medical bag with a satisfied snap. "There are tests I'd like to run, observations to be made. This condition of yours may hold the key to understanding phenomena that science has long dismissed as impossible." Cole was adjusting his sleeve over the freshly rewrapped wound when a soft knock came at the hotel room door. Dr. Blackwood opened it to reveal Sarah Henderson, her face creased with worry and something else suspicion. "I heard about the trouble at the saloon last night," she said, her eyes moving between Cole and the doctor. "Are you hurt, Cole?" "Just some bumps and bruises," Cole replied, though the lie felt heavy on his tongue. "Dr. Blackwood was kind enough to patch me up." Sarah's gaze lingered on Cole's carefully positioned left arm, and he could see questions forming behind her green eyes. She was an intelligent woman, and his secretive behavior with the doctor hadn't gone unnoticed. "I brought this," Sarah said, reaching into her pocket to produce a small silver locket. "It was my grandmother's. She used to say it brought protection to those who carried it." She held it out to Cole, her fingers briefly touching his as he accepted it. "Maybe it's foolish, but I'd feel better knowing you had it." Cole opened the locket to find a pressed flower inside, a desert bloom he recognized from the area around Perdition Mine. The coincidence sent a shock through his system, and for a moment the wound beneath his sleeve pulsed so strongly he was afraid both Sarah and the doctor would notice. "Thank you," he managed, closing the locket and tucking it into his vest pocket. "I'll treasure it." As Sarah left, Cole caught Dr. Blackwood studying him with renewed interest. "She cares for you," the doctor observed. "That kind of emotional connection can be quite powerful. In my studies, I've found that strong human bonds sometimes affect supernatural conditions in unexpected ways." The casual mention of the supernatural made Cole's blood run cold. "What kind of studies?" Dr. Blackwood smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The kind that most of my colleagues would consider career suicide to admit. I've spent decades investigating cases that conventional medicine can't explain. Yours is simply the most remarkable I've encountered." That afternoon, Cole returned to the Henderson ranch to find the entire property in an uproar. Thomas Henderson met him at the gate, his weathered face grim with worry. "Glad you're back, Cole. We've got a situation with the cattle. They're acting strange, spooked by something. We can't see or hear. Lost 3 head overnight, and the rest are bunched up in the far corner of the north pasture, refusing to graze." Cole followed Henderson to the affected area, his enhanced senses picking up details that others missed. The air carried a strange, metallic taste, and there was an underlying vibration in the earth that seemed to resonate with the thing in his arm. Whatever was happening to the cattle, it was connected to his condition. He was certain of it. "When did this start?" Cole asked, watching a prize bull paw nervously at the ground. 3 days ago, just after that storm rolled through. But it's gotten worse since last night." Henderson paused, giving Cole a meaningful look. "Since you tangled with Jake Morrison and his friends." The implication was clear. Henderson suspected Cole's presence was somehow connected to the strange behavior of his livestock. The thought terrified Cole because he was beginning to suspect the same thing. That evening, Cole sat in his cabin writing in his leather journal, trying to make sense of the day's events. The pressed flower from Sarah's locket lay on the table beside him, and he found himself sketching its delicate petals while his conscious mind wrestled with larger questions as he drew. His hand began moving of its own accord, adding details that weren't part of the flower. Geometric patterns flowed from his pencil, the same alien designs that were spreading beneath his skin. But tonight, there was something new, symbols that looked almost like writing, as if whatever was inside him was trying to communicate. A knock at his door interrupted his work. Cole quickly closed the journal and opened the door to find Sarah standing on his small porch, her face flushed from the evening ride. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she said, "but I couldn't sleep. There's something I need to ask you, and I need you to be honest with me." Cole stepped aside to let her in, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What's on your mind?" Sarah walked to the center of the small room, then turned to face him with determination written across her features. "That Dr. Blackwood, he's not what he seems, is he? I've been asking around town, and nobody knows anything about him except that he appeared out of nowhere 3 days ago. The same day our cattle started acting strange. Sarah, and you," she continued, her voice rising slightly, "you've been different since last night. More guarded, more secretive than usual. That wound on your arm, it's not just an old injury, is it?" For a moment, Cole considered telling her everything. The burden of carrying his secret alone had grown almost unbearable, and Sarah's obvious care for him made the temptation to confess overwhelming. But then he thought about what the truth might do to her, how it might change the way she looked at him. "Some things are better left alone," he said quietly. Sarah's eyes flashed with frustration. "Don't you dare patronize me, Cole Maddox. I'm not some fragile flower who can't handle the truth. If you're in danger, if something's threatening you or this ranch, I have a right to know." Before Cole could respond, a sound echoed across the desert, a low, resonant call that seemed to come from deep beneath the earth. It was the same sound he'd been hearing in his dreams, but stronger now, more insistent. The wound beneath his sleeve pulsed in response, and he had to grip the doorframe to keep from crying out. Sarah heard it too. Her face went pale, and she moved instinctively closer to Cole. "What was that?" "I don't know," Cole lied, though every cell in his body knew exactly what it was. Whatever had marked him at Perdition Mine was calling to him, and the call was growing stronger. Soon, he would have to choose between the life he'd built in Copper Ridge and the dark destiny that had been stalking him for 15 years. Outside, the desert night fell silent, as if every living creature was holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The next morning brought Sarah to Cole's cabin with a determined expression and a yellowed newspaper clipping in her hands. She'd clearly spent the sleepless night hours in research, and the satisfaction in her eyes told him she'd found something significant. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, settling herself at his small table. "About Perdition Mine." Cole felt his blood turn to ice. "Sarah, no, listen to me first." She spread the newspaper clipping on the table between them. The paper was dated 15 years ago, and the headline read, "Strange Lights and Disappearances Plague Abandoned Mine." Below it was an article describing unexplained phenomena in the desert, including reports of strange sounds, missing prospectors, and lights that moved beneath the ground. "I found this in our old newspapers," Sarah continued. "My father keeps everything, and I remembered him talking about the strange happenings around that time. 3 men went missing near Perdition Mine during the same week this article was published. Their names were listed as John Fletcher, Miguel Santos, and—" She paused, looking directly at him. "And Cole Maddox, age 19, last seen heading toward the abandoned mine works." The words hung in the air between them like an accusation and a revelation. Cole stared at the newspaper, seeing his younger self's name in print for the first time in 15 years. He'd been so young then, so full of reckless courage and dreams of easy money. "According to this article, you were presumed dead," Sarah said gently. Your horse came back to town without you, covered in blood. They searched for days but never found the body. The other two men were never seen again. Cole reached across the table and touched the faded ink of his own name. The other two men, what happened to them? I think you know, Sarah said quietly. I think they found whatever you found at that mine, and it killed them. But somehow, you survived. Somehow, you came back changed. The partial truth hung between them, and Cole found himself caught between gratitude for her understanding and terror at how close she was to the complete horror of what had happened. He had survived, but the thing that had marked him hadn't. Let him go. It had been changing him, preparing him for 15 long years. Sarah, there are things about that night that I don't fully understand myself, he began carefully. But you're right about one thing. I'm not the same man who went into that mine. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Blackwood's voice called from outside the cabin. Mr. Maddox? I'd like to continue our examination if you have a moment. Sarah's expression hardened. He's been asking about you all over town, making inquiries about the mine, about the old stories. Yesterday, I caught him talking to Mrs. Patterson about local legends and folklore. Cole felt a chill of apprehension. What did he want to know? Everything. Stories about creatures in the desert, unexplained deaths, strange lights. He's collecting information like a man building a case. Dr. Blackwood knocked on the door, his voice carrying the polite insistence of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. Cole reluctantly opened the door to find the doctor standing on his porch with his medical bag and what appeared to be additional equipment instruments Cole didn't recognize. Good morning, Mr. Maddox, Miss Henderson, the doctor said pleasantly. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. As a matter of fact, you are, Sarah said coolly. We were having a private conversation. Dr. Blackwood's smile never wavered, but Cole caught something cold and calculating in the man's eyes. Of course. But medical matters can't always wait. For convenience. The condition we discussed yesterday appears to be progressing more rapidly than expected. Cole's left arm throbbed as if responding to the doctor's words, and he realized with growing alarm that the man was right. The wound was changing faster now, the patterns beneath his skin more complex and more visible. Whatever process had been slowly transforming him for 15 years was accelerating. What do you mean, progressing? Sarah asked, her eyes moving. Between the two men, Dr. Blackwood set down his additional equipment, a device that looked like a cross between a camera and some kind of scientific instrument. Mr. Maddox has a rather unique medical condition that requires careful monitoring. I'm hoping to document its development for scientific purposes. Scientific purposes? Sarah's voice carried a dangerous edge. What kind of scientist travels? The frontier with equipment like that? The kind who studies phenomena that conventional medicine refuses to acknowledge, Dr. Blackwood replied smoothly. The kind who recognizes that the world contains mysteries far beyond our current understanding. Cole watched this exchange with growing unease. There was something happening here that went beyond medical curiosity, something that made his enhanced senses scream warnings he couldn't ignore. The doctor's interest in his condition was too intense, too focused, as if Cole was less a patient than a specimen to be studied. I think you should leave, Cole said quietly. Dr. Blackwood's pleasant expression flickered for just a moment, revealing something hungry and predatory underneath. Mr. Maddox, I don't think you understand the significance of what's happening to you. This condition represents a breakthrough in our understanding of, I said leave. Cole's hand moved to rest on his gun, the gesture subtle but unmistakable. For a tense moment, the three of them stood frozen in a tableau of conflicting interests and hidden agendas. Then Dr. Blackwood picked up his equipment with exaggerated care, his movements deliberate and controlled. Very well, he said, his voice maintaining its cultured calm. But understand this, Mr. Maddox, what you're experiencing won't simply go away because you wish it to. The transformation will continue whether you cooperate with me or not. The only question is whether you want to face it with knowledge or ignorance. After the doctor left, Sarah turned to Cole with determination written across her features. "We're going to the town records office," she announced. "If Dr. Blackwood is researching local legends, then we need to know what he's found." The Copper Ridge Town Hall was a modest building that served as courthouse, records office, and general administrative center for the scattered community. The clerk, Mrs. Eleanor Hutchins, was a woman in her 60s who had been keeping the town's records for over 30 years. She knew every birth, death, and property transfer in the county, and her memory was legendary. "Of course, I remember the troubles at Perdition Mine," she said when Sarah asked about the newspaper articles. "Terrible business, that was." 3. Young men lost, and strange happenings for weeks afterward. "What kind of strange happenings?" Cole asked, though he dreaded the answer. Mrs. Hutchins lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Livestock found dead with no obvious cause. Strange sounds coming from the desert at night. Some folks claimed to see lights moving underground, following the old mine tunnels. And the dreams shuddered. Half the town was having nightmares about being watched by something vast and hungry." Sarah and Cole exchanged meaningful glances. The symptoms Mrs. Hutchins described matched what was happening now, 15 years later. Whatever had been disturbed at Perdition Mine was stirring again. "That doctor who was here yesterday," Mrs. Hutchins continued, "he was asking about all of this. Wanted to see every record we had about the mine, about the disappearances, about the old legends. Paid me $50 just to tell him the stories my grandmother used to tell about things that lived in the deep places of the earth. $50 was more money than most frontier towns saw in a month. Whatever Dr. Blackwood was really after. He was willing to pay handsomely for information about it. As they left the town hall, Cole felt the wound beneath his sleeve pulse with increasing intensity. The geometric patterns were spreading faster now, creeping up his arm toward his shoulder. He could feel his body changing in ways that went beyond the physical. His senses were becoming sharper, his reflexes faster, his awareness of the world around him expanding in frightening directions. "Cole," Sarah said softly, noting his distress. "Whatever's happening to you, you don't have to face it alone." Her words were both a comfort and a source of anguish. How could he ask someone he cared about to stand beside him as he transformed into something that might no longer be human? How could he risk her safety for the sake of his own desperate need for companionship? That evening, as the sun set over the desert, Cole sat outside his cabin with Sarah beside him, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The silver locket she had given him rested warm against his chest, and for a few precious moments, he could almost imagine they were just two people enjoying a peaceful evening together. "Tell me about the night it happened," Sarah said quietly. "Tell me about Perdition Mine." Cole was quiet for so long that Sarah began to think he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly he began to speak. "I was young and foolish, convinced that the world owed me something more than hard work and honest wages. There were stories about silver hidden in the deepest tunnels of the mine, treasure that the original owners had hidden when the Apache raids got too fierce. 3 of us decided to find it: me, John Fletcher, and Miguel Santos." His voice grew distant as the memories surfaced. "We went at night, thinking we were being clever by avoiding the daytime heat. The mine was deeper than we expected and stranger. The tunnels branched and twisted in ways that didn't make sense, as if they followed some logic that human minds weren't meant to understand." Cole paused, his left arm throbbing with remembered pain. "We found something in the deepest chamber. But it wasn't silver. It was alive and ancient and hungry. When it touched me, I felt like I was being dissolved and remade at the same time. John and Miguel." His voice broke slightly. "They weren't as lucky as I was. Sarah reached out and took his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. "You survived," she said simply. "That's what matters now." But Cole wasn't sure survival was the right word for what had happened to him. As the night deepened around them, he could feel the thing in his arm responding to the darkness, growing stronger, more insistent. Soon, he would have to make a choice between the human life he'd built and the alien destiny that had been shaping him for 15 years. In the distance, that low, resonant call echoed across the desert once again, and this time Cole knew he wouldn't be able to ignore it much longer. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to the Henderson ranch. Cole was mending fence near the main house when he saw an ancient figure approaching on foot, leading a pack mule loaded with prospecting equipment. The man was clearly a pale desert rat of the highest order, sun-weathered skin like old leather, wild white hair, and eyes that held the peculiar intensity of someone who'd spent too many years staring into the vastness of empty spaces. "You the fellow who's been asking questions about Perdition Mine?" the old-timer called out as he approached. Cole set down his wire cutters, every instinct suddenly alert. "Depends on who's asking." The old man cackled, a sound like wind through dry bones. "Name's Jake Morrison, folks call me Old Pete. Been working these mountains for nigh on 40 years, and I know every claim, every tunnel, every cursed hole in the ground for 100 miles around. What do you want with me?" Old Pete's expression grew serious, his weathered features creased with concern. "Heard tell there's been strange doings in town lately. Cattle acting spooked, folks having nightmares, and a fancy city doctor asking too many questions about things that ought to stay buried. Word is you might know something about what's stirring up trouble." Sarah emerged from the house, drawn by the sound of voices. She approached cautiously, clearly recognizing Old Pete from his reputation around town. The prospector was known as a harmless eccentric, but he was also rumored to know more about the desert's secrets than any man alive. "Mr. Morrison," Sarah said politely, "what brings you down from the mountains?" Old Pete tipped his battered hat. "Miss Henderson, I'm afraid I bring troubling news. Something's been disturbed up at Perdition, and it's not settling back down the way it should." Cole felt his blood turn cold. "What do you know about Perdition Mine?" The old prospector reached into his pack and withdrew a hand-drawn map, its edges worn smooth by years of handling. The paper was covered with symbols and notations in a spidery script, marking dangerous areas, collapsed tunnels, and places where, according to the legend, things best left alone could be found. "I was the one who found your horse that night, 15 years ago," Old Pete said quietly, covered in blood and foam, eyes rolling white with terror. "That animal had seen something that scared it near to death. I tracked you back toward the mine, but the trail ended at the entrance to the deep tunnels, the ones the original miners sealed up before they abandoned the claim." Cole stared at the map, recognizing landmarks from his half-remembered nightmares. "Why didn't you search for me?" "Because I knew better than to go into those tunnels after dark. My grandfather worked the original claim back in '52, before the Apache trouble started. He told me stories about what they found down there, things that weren't meant for human eyes. When the mine was finally abandoned, it wasn't because of Indian raids. It was because of what came up from the deepest levels." Sarah moved closer to examine the map. "What came up?" Old Pete's eyes grew distant, as if he were seeing things that existed beyond the normal world. "The miners called it the sleeper, something that had been resting in the rock for longer than human memory. Their digging woke it up, and once it was awake, it was hungry. Men started disappearing, then coming back changed. Those that came back at all." The words hit Cole like physical blows. Everything Old Pete was describing matched his own experience. The sense of being changed, of carrying something alien inside himself, of being slowly transformed into something other than human. "Changed how?" Cole asked, though he dreaded the answer. They became its servants, its eyes and ears in the world. Above, the thing in the deep couldn't leave its resting place, but it could work through those it had marked. Eventually, the remaining miners dynamited the deep tunnels and sealed them with blessed silver and iron. They thought that would end it. But it didn't, Sarah said, understanding dawning in her voice. No, miss. It just went back to sleep, waiting for someone foolish enough to break the seals and wake it again. Someone like 3 young treasure hunters 15 years ago. Cole's left arm was throbbing now, the patterns beneath his skin pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. What happens when it fully awakens? Old Pete folded his map with careful precision, his movements deliberate and solemn. According to my grandfather, it spreads. Each person it marks becomes a conduit for its influence, helping it extend its reach beyond the confines of the mine. Eventually, it gathers enough strength to break free of the deep places entirely. The implications were staggering. For 15 years, Cole had thought he was simply carrying a terrible burden. Now he realized he might be an unwitting agent of something vast and malevolent, something that had been using him to prepare for its return to the world. There's more, old Pete continued grimly. That doctor who's been sniffing around town, Dr. Blackwood, he's not the first of his kind to come looking. Every few years, when the thing stirs, someone shows up claiming to be a scholar or scientist. They're drawn to it like moths to flame, thinking they can control or study it. What happened to the others? Sarah asked. Some get marked, same as our friend here. Others just disappear entirely. None of them ever leave the same as they came. Old Pete's gaze fixed on Cole with uncomfortable intensity. The question now is whether you're strong enough to fight what's been growing inside you, or whether you're going to let it use you to wake up fully. Cole looked down at his concealed arm, feeling the alien presence stirring beneath his skin like a living thing. For 15 years, he'd been fighting to maintain his humanity while something inhuman grew stronger inside him. Now he was faced with the terrible possibility that his very existence might be endangering everyone he cared about. How do I fight it? He asked desperately. Old Pete studied him for a long moment, weighing what he saw against some internal measure. First thing is to stop it from reaching your heart. Once it gets that far, you'll belong to it completely. After that, he shrugged. After that, you'll need to decide whether you're willing to do what it takes to put the thing back to sleep. Permanently, which is, return to where it all began. Face the sleeper its own domain. And be prepared to sacrifice everything to keep it from spreading further. The words hung in the desert air like a death sentence. Cole looked at Sarah, seeing fear and determination warring in her green eyes. Whatever choice he made, it would affect not just his own fate, but the fate of everyone in Copper Ridge and potentially far beyond. As if summoned by their conversation, that low, resonant call echoed across the desert once again, stronger than it had ever been. In response, Cole felt the thing in his arm pulse with eager anticipation, and he knew his time for choosing was running out. That evening, Dr. Blackwood made his true intentions clear. Cole was examining the wound in the privacy of his cabin when the doctor appeared at his window like a ghost, his face pale in the lamplight. Before Cole could reach for his gun, the door burst open and 2 rough-looking men entered with weapons drawn. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary, Mr. Maddox, Dr. Blackwood said as he stepped through the doorway. I'm prepared to compensate you handsomely for your cooperation, but I will have what I came for, one way or another. Cole's enhanced reflexes kicked in, but the men were positioned to catch him in a crossfire, and one wrong move would end with him dead on his cabin floor. He raised his hands slowly, his mind racing through options. What do you want? Dr. Blackwood approached with surgical confidence, withdrawing a gleaming scalpel from his medical bag. I want a proper sample of the infected tissue. My preliminary examination was fascinating, but inadequate for the kind of analysis this specimen deserves. Specimen? Cole's voice was deadly quiet. Come now, Mr. Maddox. Surely you realize that what you carry is far more valuable than any silver or gold. This represents a quantum leap in our understanding of biological systems, possibly even consciousness itself. The applications are limitless. The doctor moved closer, and Cole could see something disturbing in the man's eyes, a hunger that went beyond scientific curiosity. This wasn't a researcher seeking knowledge, but a predator who had found the perfect prey. The organization I represent has been tracking phenomena like yours for decades. Dr. Blackwood continued conversationally. We've learned to recognize the signs. Unexplained disappearances, reports of strange lights, livestock behaving abnormally. Each incident leads us closer to understanding what we're dealing with. Cole felt the wound beneath his sleeve pulse, with increasing intensity, as if responding to the doctor's proximity. And what exactly are you dealing with? Dr. Blackwood smiled, but the expression held no warmth. Contact. Communication. The first tentative steps toward a relationship with intelligence far more advanced than our own. What you've experienced isn't infection, Mr. Maddox, it's selection. You've been chosen as a bridge between their world and ours. The word sent chills down Cole's spine. He thought of old Pete's warnings about servants and conduits, about people who came back changed from encounters with the thing in the mine. If Dr. Blackwood was right, then Cole wasn't just carrying an alien presence. He was being prepared to serve it. I won't let you cut into me like some laboratory animal, Cole said firmly. You may not have a choice in the matter. The doctor raised the scalpel, its blade catching the lamplight. My associates are quite persuasive when the scalpel flew from Dr. Blackwood's hand as an obsidian shard burst through Cole's sleeve, tearing the fabric and embedding itself in the cabin wall. The dark, glass-like material pulsed with its own internal rhythm, and Cole stared at it in horror, realizing it had come from inside his own arm. The two gunmen took a step back, their weapons wavering as they tried to process what they'd just witnessed. Dr. Blackwood, however, leaned forward with intense fascination. Extraordinary, he breathed. The integration is far more advanced than I anticipated. The organism is developing defensive capabilities, using your body as a manufacturing base for exotic materials. Cole looked down at his arm, seeing dark veins spreading outward from the point where the shard had emerged. The wound was no longer just growing, it was weaponizing itself, turning his body into something that could fight back against perceived threats. What's happening to me? Cole whispered, as much to himself as to the doctor. Evolution, Dr. Blackwood replied with scientific excitement. You're becoming something new, something that bridges the gap between human consciousness and alien intelligence. The question is whether you'll embrace your transformation or fight it until it destroys you. Before Cole could respond, Sarah's voice called from outside the cabin. Cole, I saw lights. Are you all right? Dr. Blackwood's expression hardened. Tell her to leave, or my men will ensure she can't interfere with our work. The threat to Sarah triggered something primal in Cole's transformed physiology. His vision sharpened, his strength increased, and he could feel the alien presence in his arm responding to his protective instincts. The obsidian shard in the wall began to resonate, producing a low harmonic that made the windows vibrate. Sarah, stay back! Cole shouted, then turned to face Dr. Blackwood with deadly intensity. If you hurt her, I'll kill you. I don't think you understand your situation, the doctor said calmly. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and increasingly dependent on an organism that answers to intelligence far greater than your own. Your protective instincts are admirable, but ultimately futile. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the low, resonant call that had been haunting Cole's dreams suddenly echoed across the desert with unprecedented power. This time, it wasn't distant or muffled. It was close, immediate, and filled with unmistakable urgency. Cole doubled over as the thing in his arm responded to the call, sending waves of alien communication through his nervous system. For a moment, he could see through other eyes, feel through other senses, and understand things that human language couldn't express. The sleeper was fully awake now, and it was calling its servants home. "Do you feel it?" Dr. Blackwood asked with obvious excitement. "The connection is strengthening. Soon, you'll be able to communicate directly with the intelligence that created you." "I wasn't created by anything," Cole gasped, fighting to maintain his sense of self against the overwhelming alien presence. "I'm still human. Are you?" The doctor gestured to Cole's transformed arm, to the obsidian shard still pulsing in the wall, to the way Cole's eyes now reflected light like an animal's. "Look at yourself, Mr. Maddox. Look at what you're becoming, and ask yourself honestly, how much of Cole Maddox remains?" The question cut deeper than any scalpel. Cole could feel his humanity slipping away with each pulse of the wound, each moment of alien communication. Soon, there might be nothing left of the man who had fallen in love with Sarah Henderson, nothing left of the person who had tried to build an honest life in Copper Ridge. But as that thought formed, he felt the warm weight of Sarah's silver locket against his chest and remembered the pressed flower inside a simple dessert bloom that connected him to the woman who had offered him love and acceptance. That connection, fragile as it was, might be the only thing standing between Cole Maddox and complete transformation into something else entirely. Outside, the desert night pulsed with unnatural energy, and Cole knew that whatever choice he made in the next few minutes would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of everyone he cared about. The confrontation in Cole's cabin was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Sarah's voice called out again, but this time she wasn't alone. Cole heard Old Pete's gravelly voice and what sounded like several other men from town. "Looks like your friend brought reinforcements," one of Dr. Blackwood's men muttered nervously. The doctor's composure cracked for the first time, revealing something calculating and desperate beneath his scholarly facade. "No matter. We'll take what we need and leave before they can interfere." But as Dr. Blackwood reached for Cole with surgical precision, something extraordinary happened. Sarah burst through the cabin door with Old Pete behind her, and in her hands was Dr. Blackwood's own black medical bag open to reveal its true contents. "Show them, Sarah," Old Pete commanded grimly. Sarah appended the bag, spilling its contents across Cole's floor. Instead of medical instruments, dozens of glass vials tumbled out, each containing what appeared to be tissue samples suspended in preservative fluid. But these weren't ordinary specimens. They pulsed with the same dark rhythm as Cole's wound, and several of them bore labels with dates going back decades. "Tell him about Chicago, Doc," Old Pete said with cold satisfaction. "Tell him about the other patients you've been collecting." Dr. Blackwood's face had gone pale, but his eyes remained calculating. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This research is vital to humanity's survival." Sarah picked up one of the vials, reading the faded label aloud. "Maria Santos, age 23, infected tissue sample, September 1847. She looked up at Cole with horror in her eyes. "Miguel Santos, that was one of the men who went into the mine with you, wasn't it?" Cole's blood turned to ice. Miguel Santos had been his friend, his partner in that doomed treasure hunt. According to what Cole remembered, Miguel had died in the mine that night, consumed by whatever ancient thing lived in the depths. But if Dr. Blackwood had tissue samples labeled with Miguel's sister's name from 40 years ago, then the timeline Cole thought he understood was completely wrong. "Explain," Cole demanded, his voice carrying new authority as the alien presence in his arm pulsed with threatening energy. Dr. Blackwood straightened his coat with forced dignity. "The organization I represent has been studying these incidents for over a century. What you experienced 15 years ago wasn't the first awakening. It was merely the latest in a cycle that repeats every generation or so. Each time, the entity selects new hosts, marks them, and uses them to extend its influence. Old Pete nodded grimly. He's right about that much. My grandfather's stories went back further than I told you. There were incidents in the 1840s, the 1820s, probably earlier. Each time, a few people got marked, and each time, someone like our good doctor here showed up to study them. But what happened to the others? Sarah asked. All these tissue samples, where did they come from? Dr. Blackwood's. Silence was answer enough. Cole felt rage building in his chest, powered by both human emotion and alien energy. You killed them. You killed all of them. I preserved what I could for study, the doctor replied coldly. Most of them were already beyond saving by the time I found them. The transformation process is rarely survivable in its natural state. Natural state? Cole's vision was beginning to shift, his enhanced senses picking up details that shouldn't have been visible in the dim lamplight. There's nothing natural about any of this. On the contrary, Mr. Maddox, what you're experiencing is the most natural thing in the universe evolution guided by superior intelligence. The entity in Perdition Mine isn't malevolent. It's simply operating according to its nature. It seeks to propagate, to spread, to create connections across the barriers that separate different forms of consciousness. Sarah had been examining more of the vials, and her face was growing increasingly pale. Cole, some of these samples are recent. This one is dated just 3 months ago. Dr. Blackwood's expression shifted to something almost prideful. Yes, that would be from my last successful collection. A young woman in Colorado who had been marked after exploring an abandoned copper mine. Remarkably similar presentation to your own case, Mr. Maddox. The revelation hit Cole like a physical blow. All these years, he thought he was unique, that his experience at Perdition Mine was isolated and personal. Instead, he was just the latest in a long line of victims, and Dr. Blackwood was a predator who had been harvesting them for decades. How many? Cole asked quietly. How many what? How many people have you killed in the name of your research? Dr. Blackwood considered the question with scientific detachment. 17 over the past 23 years. Each one contributed valuable data to our understanding of the transformation process. Your case, however, is unique in that you've survived longer than any previous subject while maintaining some degree of human consciousness. The casual admission of mass murder triggered something fundamental in Cole's transformed physiology. The alien presence that had been growing in his arm suddenly surged through his entire system, not with malevolent intent, but with something that felt almost like righteous anger. For the first time since his infection began, Cole felt the alien intelligence and his human consciousness working in harmony rather than conflict. That ends now, Cole said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the windows vibrate. Dr. Blackwood took a step back, finally showing real fear. You don't understand what you're doing. The research must continue. Humanity needs to understand what it's dealing with before the next phase begins. Next phase? Old Pete demanded. The doctor's composure cracked completely. The entity isn't content to simply mark individuals anymore. It's been learning, growing stronger with each cycle. Soon, it will have accumulated enough knowledge and power to attempt direct contact with human civilization. When that happens, we need to be prepared. Cole felt the truth of those words resonating through the alien presence in his system. The sleeper wasn't just marking people randomly. It was gathering intelligence, learning about human nature and human society through the experiences of its unwilling servants. Each person it touched became a source of information about the world, above ground. And you've been helping it, Sarah said with dawning horror. By killing the people it marked, by studying their transformations, you've been providing it with data about human responses to its influence. Dr. Blackwood's smile was cold and predatory. Someone has to prepare for what's coming. The entity will emerge whether we're ready or not. I'm simply trying to ensure that humanity survives the encounter. By becoming its servant yourself, old Pete observed. Look at your own hands, Doctor. For the first time, Cole noticed what old Pete had seen: dark veins running up Dr. Blackwood's wrists, barely visible beneath his sleeves, but unmistakably similar to the patterns on Cole's own arm. The doctor had been marked as well, probably years ago, and his research had been guided by alien intelligence all along. You're one of them, Cole said with certainty. You're working for it, not against it. Dr. Blackwood's facade finally crumbled completely. Working with it, Mr. Maddox. There's a difference. The entity offers partnership to those intelligent, enough to recognize its superiority. I've spent decades learning to communicate with it, to understand its goals and desires. What I offer you is the chance to join that partnership willingly, rather than being consumed by it. The confession confirmed Cole's worst fears and clarified his path forward. Dr. Blackwood wasn't a rogue scientist or a misguided researcher. He was an agent of the alien intelligence, sent to harvest and study the people it marked. The doctor's presence in Copper Ridge wasn't coincidence. It was part of a larger plan that had been building for 15 years. The mine? Cole said suddenly. You're trying to help it break free of the mine. The seals are weakening, Dr. Blackwood confirmed. Each marked individual creates tiny fractures in the barriers that contain it. Soon, those fractures will become breaks, and the entity will be able to extend its influence far beyond the confines of Perdition Mine. Cole looked at Sarah and old Pete, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. They were facing something vast and patient and utterly alien, something that had been manipulating events for generations. But they also had advantages. The entity might not expect human courage, human love, and the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect what mattered most. Then we stop it, Cole said simply. We go to the mine, and we stop it permanently. The confrontation with Dr. Blackwood ended swiftly once his true nature was revealed. The doctor's two gunmen, faced with evidence of their employer's inhuman allegiances, chose discretion over loyalty and fled into the desert night. Dr. Blackwood himself proved less cooperative. You're making a terrible mistake, he insisted as old Pete bound his hands with rope. The entity has offered humanity partnership, evolution, transcendence beyond anything our species could achieve alone. By opposing it, you're condemning your entire race to extinction. Maybe, Cole replied, examining the collection of tissue samples with growing revulsion. But we'll face that fate as humans, not as slaves to something we can't understand. Sarah had been studying old Pete's mining map by lamplight, tracing the tunnels and noting the areas marked as dangerous. If we're really going to do this, we need to be prepared. The mine is 50 miles of hard desert travel, and once we're inside, we'll be in its domain. Old Pete finished grimly. The thing has had 15 years to grow stronger since you stirred it up, Cole. It won't be sleeping peacefully when we arrive. Cole looked down at his transformed arm, feeling the alien presence stirring beneath his skin. The patterns had spread past his elbow now, dark geometric designs that pulsed with increasing intensity. Whatever was going to happen at Perdition Mine, it was going to happen soon. He could feel the entity calling to him, its patience finally exhausted. What about the seals your grandfather's generation put in place? Sarah asked old Pete. The blessed silver and iron you mentioned, are they still effective? The old prospector shrugged. Some of them, maybe. But 15 years of Cole carrying that mark has weakened the barriers considerably. Every day he's been alive, every nightmare he's had, every moment of alien communication, it's all been wearing away at the original protections. The words hit Cole like physical blows. All these years, he'd thought he was fighting to maintain his humanity. Instead, His very existence had been undermining the safeguards that protected the world from the thing that had marked him. He was not just a victim. He was an unwitting accomplice in humanity's potential destruction. "There's something else," Dr. Blackwood said suddenly, his voice carrying the kind of terrible certainty that comes with knowledge one wishes they didn't possess. The entity doesn't just want to escape the mine. It wants to establish a permanent foothold in your world. Coal has been its anchor point, its connection to human consciousness. When it finally breaks free, it will use that connection to spread itself through the entire human population. Sarah's face went pale. "Like an infection?" "Like evolution," Dr. Blackwood corrected. "Rapid, forced evolution that will transform humanity into something compatible with the entity's consciousness. Those who can't adapt will simply cease to exist." Cole felt the alien presence in his arm pulse with anticipation, and for a moment, he caught a glimpse of what Dr. Blackwood was describing: vast networks of transformed humans, their consciousness linked to something incomprehensibly ancient and powerful. It was a vision of transcendence and horror combined, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "How do we stop it?" Cole asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Old Pete's expression was grim. "Same way you'd stop any infection. You cut it out at the source, even if it kills the patient." The implication was clear. To stop the entity from using Cole as its anchor point, Cole would have to sever the connection permanently. And given how deeply the alien presence had integrated itself into his physiology, that severance would almost certainly be fatal. "There has to be another way," Sarah said desperately. "Maybe," old Pete replied. "But if there is, we'll only find it at the mine itself." The entity might be ancient and powerful, but it's been trapped for generations for good reason. There might be weaknesses we can exploit, ways to turn its own nature against it. They spent the next hour planning their approach to Perdition Mine, gathering supplies and weapons while trying to anticipate what they might face in the deep tunnels. Cole contributed what he could remember from his original journey, but his memories of that night were fragmented and unreliable. The trauma of his transformation had left gaps in his recollection that might contain crucial information as dawn approached. Cole found himself alone with Sarah while old Pete secured Dr. Blackwood in the town jail. The doctor had become increasingly agitated as the night progressed, speaking in fragments about timetables and convergences that suggested the entity's plans were more advanced than anyone had realized. "You don't have to come with us," Cole told Sarah as they watched the sun rise over the desert. "This isn't your fight." Sarah turned to face him, her green eyes fierce with determination. "Of course it's my fight. You're my fight, Cole Maddox. Whatever you're becoming, whatever you have to face, you don't face it alone." Her words carried the weight of absolute conviction, and Cole felt something shift in the alien presence within him. For the first time since his infection began, the otherworldly intelligence seemed to encounter something it couldn't understand or categorize: the inexplicable power of human love and loyalty. "Sarah, if something goes wrong at the mine, if I lose myself completely to this thing, you have to promise me you'll do what needs to be done." She shook her head firmly. "Don't ask me to make promises I won't keep. We're gonna find another way." Before Cole could argue further, old Pete returned with troubling news. "The doctor's gone," he announced grimly. "Sheriff found the jail cell empty this morning. No sign of how he got out. Lock wasn't picked, bars weren't bent. He just vanished." The news sent chills through all of them. Dr. Blackwood's disappearance suggested that the alien entity had more resources at its disposal than they'd realized, perhaps including the ability to transport its servants across distances instantaneously. "They'll warn the creature we're coming," Sarah said. "Maybe," old Pete replied, "or maybe that was always part of the plan. The entity might want Cole to return to the mine, might be counting on it, in fact." Cole felt the truth of those words resonating through the mark on his arm. The sleeper had been patient for 15 years, using him as a conduit for intelligence about human nature and society. Now, with its plans nearing fruition, it wanted him to return to complete whatever. Transformation had been interrupted all those years ago. Then we give it what it expects, Cole said quietly, but not what it wants. They spent the morning making final preparations. Old Pete contributed blessed ammunition from his grandfather's cash silver bullets inscribed with protective symbols. By a frontier preacher who had understood that some threats required both lead and faith to stop. Sarah insisted on bringing her father's rifle and enough supplies for a siege, declaring that she intended to be more than just moral support. As they prepared to leave Copper Ridge, Cole visited the town cemetery one last time. His parents were buried here, along with the dreams of the young man who had once believed the world owed him fortune and glory. Standing before their weathered headstones, Cole tried to find words for what might be his final goodbye. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he said quietly. "I was just a foolish boy looking for easy money and adventure. Now I might be the key to humanity's destruction." The alien presence in his arm pulsed gently, and for a moment, Cole sensed something that might have been regret from the otherworldly intelligence. Perhaps the entity had never intended to cause such suffering. Perhaps it was simply following its own nature, trying to survive and propagate in the only way it knew how. But intentions mattered less than consequences, and the consequences of Cole's survival were becoming clear. Sarah found him at his parents' grave, her expression soft with understanding. "They'd be proud of you," she said simply. "Not for what you've become, but for what you're willing to sacrifice to protect others." "Would they?" Cole asked. "I've spent 15 years hiding from the truth, running from responsibility. If I'd been braver, if I'd faced this sooner, you'd probably be dead, and the entity would have found another anchor point," Sarah interrupted. "Sometimes survival isn't about courage, Cole. Sometimes it's about endurance. You've carried this burden longer than anyone else ever has. That means something." As they rode out of Copper Ridge toward the desert waste beyond, Cole found himself thinking about the pressed flower in Sarah's locket, now resting against his chest. Such a small thing, a simple bloom that had caught her grandmother's attention decades ago. Yet it had become a symbol of connection, of love, of all the human experiences the alien entity couldn't understand or replicate. The journey to Perdition Mine would take them through some of the harshest terrain in the territory waterless. Stretches where the sun could kill a man in hours, and the nights brought cold that cut to the bone. But Cole barely noticed the physical hardships. His entire being was focused on the approaching confrontation, on the choice between humanity and transcendence that awaited him in the deep tunnels. As the sun reached its zenith, painting the desert in shades of gold and copper, Cole felt the entity's call growing stronger, not just in his arm now, but throughout his entire body. The transformation was accelerating, preparing him for what was to come. Soon, he would have to choose between the man he had been and the creature he was becoming. But first, he would have to survive whatever was waiting for them at Perdition Mine, and ensure that Sarah and old Pete survived it too. Whatever the cost to himself, he would not let the entity use his death as a doorway into the human world. The desert stretched endlessly before them, shimmering with heat and the promise of answers that might destroy them all. Behind them, Copper Ridge grew smaller and smaller until it vanished entirely, leaving only the vast emptiness of the frontier and the terrible certainty that some journeys could never be undone. In the distance, barely visible on the horizon, the mountains where it ends, where Perdition Mine waited, began to take shape against the burning sky. The entrance to Perdition Mine yawned before them like the mouth of some prehistoric beast, carved into the mountainside with an architecture that seemed to defy both gravity and reason. The original miner's work was still visible near the entrance wooden support beams, rusted railway tracks, and the scattered debris of hasty abandonment. But deeper in the tunnel, where lamplight couldn't penetrate, something else had been at work. "Dear God," Sarah whispered, staring at the organic curves that had grown around the man-made passages. "It's alive." The mine walls pulsed with a rhythm that matched Cole's heartbeat, and the air carried a metallic taste that made his transformed physiology sing with recognition. This was the heart of the mine, the pulsing organic chamber where the entity had made its home for longer than human memory. Every step they took brought them closer to a confrontation that would determine the fate of not just themselves, but potentially all of humanity. Old Pete led the way with his grandfather's blessed lantern, its light seeming to push back more than just physical darkness. The silver and iron symbols etched into its frame glowed with their own cold fire, creating a protective barrier around the three intruders. But Cole could feel that protection weakening with each step deeper into the mine, worn away by 15 years of his own unwilling service to the entity below. "The tunnels have changed," Old Pete muttered, consulting his hand-drawn map. "These passages weren't here in my grandfather's time. The thing's been reshaping the entire mine to suit its purposes." They passed through chambers filled with the remains of previous visitors, not just the bones of long-dead miners, but more recent evidence of Dr. Blackwood's activities. Surgical instruments lay scattered among tissue samples and notebooks, filled with observations that human minds weren't meant to comprehend. The doctor had been conducting his research here for years, possibly decades, using the mine as his laboratory and the entity as his ultimate test subject. "Look at this," Sarah called softly, kneeling beside what appeared to be a shrine of sorts. Dozens of objects were arranged in careful patterns, personal items from the entity's victims, each one marking another life consumed by its hunger for knowledge and connection. Cole recognized some of the items from his nightmares: a pocket watch, a wedding ring, a child's toy carved from wood. But it was the centerpiece of the shrine that made Cole's blood run cold. There, elevated above all the other offerings, was a leather journal that looked exactly like his own. He reached for it with trembling hands, opening it to find pages covered with the same geometric patterns he'd been unconsciously drawing for 15 years. It's been collecting them, he realized with growing horror. Everyone it marked, everyone it changed, it kept some piece of them, some record of their transformation. The journal contained sketches and writings from dozens of different hands, all depicting the same alien geometries, all describing the same slow process of transformation and loss of self. Each entry was like looking into a dark mirror, showing Cole what he might become if he surrendered completely to the entity's influence. "We're not the first to make it this far," Old Pete observed grimly, examining scratches on the tunnel walls. "Someone's been fighting their way deeper into the mine recently. The marks look fresh." The answer came as they rounded the next bend in the tunnel. Dr. Blackwood stood waiting for them in a chamber that defied physical laws, his form somehow both human and utterly alien. The transformation that had been hidden beneath his civilized facade was now complete, revealing patterns of dark tissue that matched Cole's own condition, but far more advanced. "Welcome home, Mr. Maddox," the doctor said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the tunnel walls resonate. "The entity has been waiting for you to complete the circle." Behind Dr. Blackwood, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber that hurt to look at directly. The heart of the mine pulsed with organic rhythms, its walls covered in geometric patterns that shifted and changed like living things. And at the center of it all, something vast and ancient stirred in response to Cole's presence. "This is where it happened," Cole whispered, memories flooding back with crystalline clarity. "This is where Miguel and John died. This is where they were transformed, Doctor." Blackwood corrected. "Just as you were transformed, just as I was transformed. We are all part of its greater purpose now, links in a chain that connects the human world to intelligences beyond imagination. The entity's influence pressed against." Cole's mind, offering visions of transcendence and unity, of consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of individual existence. For a moment, he was tempted to accept what it offered, to let go of his humanity and become part of something larger and more purposeful than anything he could achieve alone. But then he felt the warm weight of Sarah's locket against his chest, and heard her voice calling his name from what seemed like a great distance. The simple human love contained in that small silver case proved stronger than all the entity's promises, anchoring Cole to his identity and his purpose. The final battle was about to begin, and Cole Maddox, whatever he had become, would face. It is a man defending the woman he loved and the world they both called home. The confrontation in the heart of the mind began not with violence, but with revelation. The entity that had been sleeping in the deep places for centuries revealed itself in all its alien majesty. Not the monster Cole had expected, but something that transcended human categories of good and evil entirely. It was vast beyond comprehension, ancient beyond measure, and utterly alone. Through the connection established by 15 years of infection, Cole felt its loneliness like a physical ache. The entity had been calling across the void for eons, seeking connection with other intelligences, other forms of consciousness that might understand its nature and purpose. "You see now," Dr. Blackwood said, his transformed features glowing with alien light. "It doesn't seek to destroy humanity. It seeks to elevate us, to make us part of something greater than ourselves." But Cole also felt the entity's hunger, its need to consume and transform everything it touched. The creature couldn't conceive of existence without complete unity of purpose and thought. To it, individual consciousness was an aberration, a malfunction, to be corrected through integration into its vast collective mind. "Sarah," Cole called without taking his eyes off Dr. Blackwood, "whatever happens, remember who I am. Remember the man I was before this thing got its claws in me." "Cole Maddox," she replied firmly, her voice carrying across the impossible acoustics of the chamber. "Born in Copper Ridge, lost his parents to fever, spent 15 years carrying a burden that would have killed a lesser man. That's who you are, and that's who you'll always be." Her words triggered something unexpected in the alien presence that had been growing within. Cole, for the first time since his infection began, he felt the entity recoil, confused by the strength of human connection and individual identity. It could understand survival instinct, reproduction, the drive to propagate, but love, loyalty, and self-sacrifice were concepts that lay outside its vast but limited comprehension. "You cannot resist what you have become," Dr. Blackwood insisted, advancing with surgical precision. "The transformation is complete. You belong to it now, just as I do, just as all the others did." Cole reached into his vest pocket and withdrew his father's pocket watch, the one item from his past that he'd carried through 15 years of wandering. The simple brass timepiece had belonged to 3 generations of honest men who had worked hard, loved deeply, and faced their troubles with quiet courage. As Cole held it, he felt their strength flowing through him, reinforcing his human identity against the alien influence. "You're wrong," Cole said quietly. "I belong to myself and to the people I choose to protect." The battle that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred in the physical world. Cole fought not just Dr. Blackwood's transformed body, but the alien consciousness that was trying to complete his conversion. His enhanced strength and speed, gifts from 15 years of infection, became weapons turned against their source. But the entity was vast and patient, and it had been preparing for this moment far longer than Cole had been alive. As they fought, it began to manifest more directly in the physical world, the heart of the mind pulsing and shifting to accommodate its emerging presence. "You cannot win," Dr. Blackwood gasped as Cole's blessed silver bullets found their mark. "Even if you destroy me, even if you resist transformation, it will find other servants, other anchor points. You are not the first, and you will not be the last." "Maybe not," Cole replied, pressing his father's watch against the mark on his arm. "But I can make sure I'm not the one who opens the door." The silver case of the watch burned like acid against the alien tissue, but Cole held it firm, using the pain as an anchor to his human identity. The entity's influence began to weaken, confused by his willingness to cause himself agony rather than surrender to transcendence. In that moment of confusion, Cole made his choice. Instead of fighting the alien presence within him, he embraced it, but on his terms, with his consciousness dominant and his human identity intact. The entity had spent 15 years learning about humanity through him, but the connection worked both ways. Cole had learned about the entity as well, understood its nature and limitations. "Sarah, old Pete, get out of here now," Cole commanded as he began the most dangerous gamble of his life. "What I'm about to do might bring down the whole mountain." "I'm not leaving you," Sarah shouted over the growing resonance that filled the chamber. "You have to," Cole replied, his voice already beginning to carry alien harmonics. "Someone needs to remember what happened here. Someone needs to tell the story. Make sure they know that Cole Maddox died human, no matter what else he became." The entity realized what Cole intended just moments too late. Instead of surrendering to its will, he was turning the connection against it, using the very link it had forged to trap it within his dying body. As Cole's human consciousness began to burn away under the strain, he felt a moment of perfect unity, not with the alien intelligence, but with everyone he had ever loved or chosen to protect. The explosion that followed could be heard 50 miles away, and the mountain that housed Perdition Mine collapsed entirely, sealing whatever remained of the entity beneath tons of blessed rock and silver-inscribed iron. 6 months later, Sarah Henderson stood at the edge of what had once been Perdition Mine, now nothing more than a field of rubble and twisted metal beneath the desert sun. The explosion that had ended Cole's long ordeal had indeed brought down the entire mountain, creating a crater that stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Nothing lived in that barren circle, not plants, not animals, not even the hardy desert insects that could survive anywhere else in the territory. But Cole Maddox had survived. They had found him 3 days after the collapse, buried beneath tons of rock but somehow still breathing, his left arm bearing only the faintest trace of a scar where the alien wound had festered for 15 years. The healed scar was all that remained of his supernatural ordeal, a thin white line that caught the light just slightly differently than the rest of his skin. "The doctor says it's a miracle," Sarah said to old Pete, who had taken to visiting the site every few weeks, still struggling to believe that the ancient threat had finally been put to rest. "No trace of the infection remains in his system. Whatever he did down there, it worked." Old Pete nodded slowly, his weathered face creased with the satisfaction of a man who had lived to see an old debt finally paid. "My grandfather would have been proud. All those years of keeping the stories alive, making sure folks remembered the danger, it finally paid off when it mattered most." They walked together through the ruins, Sarah carrying a small bouquet of desert flowers, the same variety that had been pressed in her grandmother's locket. She placed them at the spot where the mine entrance had once yawned like a hungry mouth, now sealed forever beneath blessed rock and iron. "Have you told him yet?" Old Pete asked gently. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, where new life was beginning to stir, the child she and Cole had created in the quiet weeks following his recovery. "Tonight," she said softly, "I wanted to come here first, to say goodbye to the past properly." The journey back to Copper Ridge took them through country that had been slowly returning to normal since the mine's destruction. Cattle grazed peacefully in pastures where they had once huddled in terror. Wildlife had returned to streams and watering holes that had been mysteriously empty for months. Even the weather seemed more settled, as if the alien presence had been disturbing natural patterns in ways nobody had fully understood. Cole was waiting for them at the Henderson Ranch, his recovery remarkable but not yet complete. The doctors said he would always carry some effects from his ordeal-enhanced reflexes, slightly improved vision, an uncanny ability to sense things others missed. But these were human improvements now. Giftspot was suffering rather than alien modifications. Imposed from outside. "How was your visit to the site?" he asked Sarah as she dismounted from her horse. There was concern in his voice. He worried about her making the journey to the ruins, as if proximity to the buried entity might somehow affect her. "Peaceful," she replied honestly. "Whatever was down there, it's truly gone now. The land is healing." Cole nodded, unconsciously touching the faint scar on his left arm. He had no memory of the final confrontation in the heart of the mine, only fragmented impressions of alien consciousness and human determination locked in mortal struggle. The doctor said the trauma of the experience had mercifully blocked the last, worst memories, leaving him free to build a new life without the constant weight of otherworldly knowledge. That evening, as they sat together on the porch of what would soon be their shared home, Sarah told Cole about the child they had created together. His reaction was everything she had hoped for: wonder, joy, and a fierce determination to be the kind of father who protected his family from all the darkness the world might contain. A son or daughter who will never have to carry the burden. "I carried," Cole said softly, his hand covering hers on her still flat stomach. "A child who will grow up free." "Free, but not ignorant," Sarah corrected. "Old Pete is already talking about writing down the whole story, making sure future generations remember what happened here. Knowledge can be a protection if it's used wisely." They married 3 weeks later in the small church that served Copper Ridge and the surrounding ranches. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, attended by everyone who had played a role in the strange events that had transformed their quiet frontier town into the site of humanity's greatest battle against forces beyond comprehension. Dr. Whitman, the town physician who had first offered to help Cole with his mysterious condition, gave the blessing. Old Pete stood as Cole's best man, his grandfather's blessed silver watch gleaming on his vest as a reminder that some victories are won by ordinary people who refuse to surrender to extraordinary evil. As Cole and Sarah exchanged vows, promising to love and protect each other through whatever challenges the future might bring, the healed scar on Cole's arm caught the afternoon light, creating a brief shimmer that reminded everyone present of how much they had almost lost. But it was only a memory now, a testament to human courage and the power of love to overcome even the most alien of influences. Cole Maddox had carried his burden for 15 years, and in the end, he had laid it down not through surrender, but through the willingness to sacrifice everything for those he loved. The frontier town of Copper Ridge settled back into its quiet rhythms, its people knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary, but content to let it become legend rather than obsession. Some secrets were worth keeping, some stories worth remembering, and some victories worth celebrating in the simple act of living freely in the aftermath of triumph. In the distance, the mountains where Perdition Mine had once threatened the world stood peaceful and empty, their peaks catching the last light of day like sentinels watching over a land finally free from ancient nightmares. And in that freedom, new stories began, stories of love, family, and the endless human capacity for hope even in the wake of unimaginable darkness.